about growing up and in this case about the paradox of bootstrapping. You always say we have to pull ourselves up by the bootstraps, and this is of course a way to describe a paradox. And I think the seeming paradox is that if you're high entropy and you're in this vicious circle of making poor choices, how do you get out of that? How do you and I'm really interested now about the mechanics. How do you get out of this vicious circle, and what is it actually that makes you then suddenly realize, no, I need to make a good choice now? Because you also say that if I want to grow up, I need to be authentic. So if somebody is high entropy and then being authentic, that would mean that that person would then probably continue to make bad choices. So how does the change at the being level come about?
Well, if you're high entropy and you make bad choices, you are authentic and you're high entropy and you continue to make bad choices, your life gets more and more dysfunctional. More and more dysfunctional. You become more and more unhappy. You start to become depressed because all of your choices are high entropy choices, and that is authentically you, but it keeps leading to more and more dysfunction in your life and more unhappiness. And the thing that turns it around is you have to get to the point where you realize that your high entropy choices are the cause of the dysfunction. If you can see that.
Realization?
Yeah, I say that realization and the sense that what you've been doing just doesn't work. You get to the point, it's almost like described that you get to the, there's a word for that, when you get to the very bottom and there's no place, you can't dig a hole any deeper. The dark night of the soul is what that's called. You get to this point where just everything is totally as awful as it can be, and there's just no way that it could get worse. And at that point, you tend to give up, and you throw up your hands and say, okay, I'm going to stop trying to make things better. Stop trying to fix this and fix that, because every time I do that, I make bad choices in my effort to make it better, and it just keeps getting worse. And you come to this conclusion that the only way to change is to change your outlook and the way you make choices. So it's that you get to a point where you realize that you need that lower entropy choices are better, and that your problem is yourself, and that life will get better if you just change what you're doing. And a lot of times that's not so much an intellectual thing as it is an emotional thing. When you hit that dark night of the soul and you just throw up your hands and say, I give up. I'm going to stop trying to force things to be the way I want. And as soon as you stop trying to force things, everything starts to get better. And then you start seeing the world from a different viewpoint. You let go of that negative tunnel vision that you had. Everything is awful. Everything sucks. Everything is terrible. And suddenly that viewpoint goes away, and it just is what it is. It's not really terrible. It's your viewpoint, your interpretation that's terrible. It just is what it is. And you are what you are. And now you need to get in gear and start interacting with what is and get out of this negative interpretation cycle that you've created for yourself. So when you get to that point, then you turn around and start going the other way. But often people have to hit bottom before they can stop that downward, process and go back the other way. So
but it wouldn't be a fair assessment to say, okay, but then it's just the fear of more pain that leads me to reconsider my view. So I'm just acting out of fear.
No, it's not the fear of more pain. As long as there's a fear of pain, I guess you continue downward. You get to the point where there can't be any more pain, where the pain is as much pain as there is. And there's no point in fearing any more pain because you have maximum pain already. Can't get any more painful. So at that point, you let go of the fear. It already is. You're already there. There's no fear that you can descend any lower. You see, and at that point, people tend to let go, and now they have an opportunity to see things differently, from a different viewpoint. So I don't think it's just a fear of more pain. Now, you might get that before you hit bottom. You may say, well, no, I see what's going on now. I see that I'm making myself more and more miserable. I need to stop and go the other way. And, that's a carrot and stick. The carrot would be less pain, and you change your mind and start working at it. So in that case, it's not so much a fear of more pain as it is you don't want any more pain, and you see that there's another way. But that's really, you get to that before you really hit bottom. You don't really hit bottom until you've come to the conclusion that it can't get any worse. Fear or no fear, there is no more pain. Pain is 100% saturated. And after that, you kind of let go. And when you let go of that interpretation, and you begin to see things differently. So I've talked to any number of people that have done that. They've descended down to the point that they let go of their focus on the negative. They stop focusing on the negative. They start really focusing on anything. They just start being. And then they realize that world out there just is the way it is. It's not really aggressively trying to get them. They're not really victims of an evil world. The world is just the way it is, and they need to interact with it in a way that's more positive. And sometimes that's the beginning of going from unhappy to happy, is when you hit that bottom rung on the ladder. So the pulling yourself up by your bootstraps just means that in general, a giant leap is not expected. You don't suddenly make big changes. I make the analogy in my book that it's like an athlete. If you want to run a marathon, if you want to be able to run 25 miles and do it all fairly quickly, you're not going to say, okay, I'm psyched for this. Now I'm going to go run my 25 miles. You won't be able to do it. You have to work on it and train for it. And maybe 2 years later, you might be able to run that 25 miles, but only if you work on it very consistently. And that's what I mean by pulling yourself up to the bootstraps. You have to take it one little step at a time. It's something you're building, and each new step builds on the last step. See, so it's very difficult to make a great leap. It's not that has never happened, but when it does happen, it's because people really were ready to make those changes. They really had it all together, and just that last chunk comes into place, and suddenly they have a big aha, and they take a leap forward. But they've already done all the work to get themselves up to the point that they were really ready for that. So it takes work, and you have to develop yourself into something different than it is 1 in 10 at a time. That's the growing up process. It's not something that you can leap to. It's something you have to earn.